On today's episode of the Wild Party Podcast, I sit down with Rachel Lee, the visionary founding partner and general manager of Hydefy, a company spinning extremophile fungi into high-performance luxury materials. Rachel's story is wild in the best way, and she shares with us what happens when a NASA-funded science experiment in Yellowstone collides with high fashion in London. From global development work to biotech innovation, she's now leading a team that's building the next generation of sustainable material. We talk supply chains, behavior change, storytelling, and why mushrooms are really having their moment. You'll never look at vegan leather or Yellowstone the same way again. Let's get the party started. Welcome to the Wild Party Podcast, where we celebrate the visionaries behind vegan, ethical, and sustainable business. In each episode, we'll dive deep into their journeys, uncovering the why behind their mission-driven business. I'm your host, Stephanie Lahart. Tune in with me for passionate discussions about overcoming challenges, innovative marketing strategies, and the power of using business as a force for good. So whether you're an entrepreneur seeking guidance or a conscious consumer wanting to support impactful brands, join us as we explore the stories behind the businesses that are changing the world for the better. Let's get the party started. Today on the show, I am joined by Rachel Lee, the visionary founding partner and general manager of Hydefy, a company that's redefining the future of fashion with fungi. You know, guys, we are a huge fan of fungus if you've heard our previous episodes. Now, Rachel and her team have developed a sleek, high-performance alternative to leather using extremophile fungus. If you don't know what that is, don't worry, we're going to explain. And this was originally discovered in Yellowstone National Park. You're like hitting all my happy buttons right now. Okay, but the real truth is Hydefy's breakthrough debut comes in a collaboration with none other than Stella McCartney, and I've seen the bag. I want it so bad. But beyond that, Rachel is bringing to us an incredible background that spans global development, biotechnology, and sustainable innovation. And I just can't wait to dive into how she is scaling a material revolution one handbag at a time. And I've already told Rachel she's going to have to explain so much of this to me, but I'm in it. I'm a fungus aficionado. And Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on Hydefy, Stephanie.
Yes, we are very excited to talk to you. First of all, as you probably know, because I mention it on all my shows, I am a lifestyle vegan, and I am working personally to make sure that leather is out of our ecosystem because we don't need it anymore. And you are here to prove why that is true, because you are working with a company that has developed a whole new material that is not only better, but it's more sustainable and it's a lot better looking from what I've seen. So let's talk about the beginning of maybe your journey first. Rachel, how did you come to work with Hydefy? What were you doing previous to this?
Yeah, so I was doing nothing related to vegan materials from fungi. As you mentioned, my background has been, it's been all spanning. Most recently, before I joined the company, I was actually in global development doing work. I've always been really motivated by, solving a problem that I'm really passionate about or building toward a North Star. And for me, a lot of that had to do with resources, natural resources, how they're allocated. My original passion began around the topic of hunger, thinking that, we have a food system that has incredible abilities to produce. We shouldn't have such issues. And that's what led me down some of my career choices. So, one of those choices was philanthropy and thinking about allocating resources to intractable challenges. And eventually, I became really passionate about entrepreneurship and biotech because ultimately we need solutions and we need products and solutions that we can scale up and direct funding to. And that's how I ended up joining Nature's Find, which is the parent company for Hydefy, where we spun the company out of and incubated it from. And Nature's Find as a company is bringing a new to the world protein, which is this base from this fungi, and creating alternate products. So vegan meat products, vegan dairy products, etc., from the same fungi. And I became interested in materials because it felt like a very similar issue to the food system, where we're thinking about how do we use the world's resources in a more sustainable manner and giving consumers options and choices. So it was a really fun match to think about working in food tech, which was my original passion, and then being able to build out the biomaterial side of the company.
That makes total sense. And so, yes, we actually found you through the Nature's Fine path because I think we reached out to someone over there to see if we could get somebody on the show. And they said, hey, you should actually talk to Rachel over at Hydefy. And when they told me about the company, I'm like, absolutely. Because listen, fungus is very sexy right now. And I do blame Instagram. It is like, everything. It's all of the mushroom coffees, the mushroom supplements, this mushroom skincare. I mean, mushroom is having its day, right? So it makes perfect sense. The next step is like, let us create a material from this amazing, I don't even know, what do you call it? Plant life? Is it a plant? First of all, let's define that. What is a mushroom? What is fungi?
Mushroom is part of the fungi kingdom. And it's a great point you bring up, Stephanie, because I think when we think about our storytelling, we also have to think about how do we remain scientifically correct, but also make it pretty simple. And at Hydify, we use a lot of nature-based inputs, but technically, the fungi we use is not a plant because it's from a different kingdom. So most of the mushrooms that we see are from the fungi kingdom, and the extremophile that we use is a fungi that is not a mushroom. So all mushroom are fungi, not all fungi are mushroom. And it's an incredible kingdom because there's so many strains, there's so many um, fungi within that we see in our daily lives, whether it's in the food that we eat or now we put in our leather.
That's amazing. Okay, for everyone who's listening, make sure you have your notebook. This is definitely an educational podcast, this one. So take notes, and if not, run over to the blog because we will have a blog article after this because I know I'm already learning so much about this, and I'm really excited to learn even more. Okay, so I did read that this project actually originated from some NASA science experiments, right? Or NASA stuff. Let's put it NASA stuff that was going over in Yellowstone National Park. What is that about? Tell me about that journey. What was happening with NASA that they suddenly discovered this extremophile fungi, which you will explain what that means, and then it led to this material because that's a big jump. Like, how does that all happen?
Yes, like all interesting and fun discoveries, it happens when you're not actually looking for it potentially. So one of the founders of Nature's Find and the overall Finder group, when he was a PhD student, he was doing research that was supported by NASA. And from NASA, it makes sense because they're thinking about how do we support extreme forms of life. When you go to Mars or when you go to extraterrestrial environments, how does life work? How do we sustain life? And there are very few spots on Earth that can mimic extreme environments, but Yellowstone was one of them. So the volcanic geysers within that, it's extremely acidic, extremely hot. No regular life can live in it. So one of these days, I'll share the photo or video of the original spots where we did some research, and you don't actually see much of a tree skyline because normal life cannot live there. And that's why we call them extremophiles, because they're able to thrive and live in extreme environments. So the particular organism that we found thrives in very acidic and hot environments. And originally, they were thinking about maybe this could be an interesting application for biofuel or for some other sustainability oriented applications. But when you looked at it under a microscope after fermentation, it had this filamentous structure that looked quite honestly like muscle or protein structures. And it also had all the essential amino acids, which made it a very interesting application around protein. And it also had a very neutral taste. Yes, somebody tasted it initially, and that's how the discovery began, and that's what led to thinking about, okay, food applications, and then then further from there, and at the Finder Group, we also are thinking about a few other applications beyond biomaterials and food, but that's really where it started, and we're grateful to NASA and amazing institutions that fund research that could lead to a lot of interesting ideas, even if it's not exactly what it was originally intended for.
Oh, I totally agree. Research is really important, whether it is, an institution like NASA or educational research, which unfortunately a lot of it seems to be coming under fire these days. So I'll just put that out there. Research is important for this very reason. You don't know what you're going to find. And when you do find it, you're like, how could we apply this to make living better, for everyone, the plants, humans, animals, everything across the board. Now, with that said, I've been to Yellowstone. I've been to the geysers. I know what you're talking about. They are majestic, they are beautiful, and they are hot as heck.
Yes, every few years they have stories about do not disturb, people dropping
Yes.
something in. You will find nothing left of whatever you
Yes.
drop in.
And they also tell you do not climb in the pools like you will die. And I will
Yes,
have to
please.
say, I am actually amazed more people don't die in Yellowstone because they don't have these things roped off or barricaded in any way. They're relying on humans to make good choices. And I don't
Mhm.
know. That has not proved the best historically. So, people, if you do go to Yellowstone, stay on the path and don't disturb nature. If you could hear that. Okay. Okay, so when after NASA started this journey then and discovered this material then, how then did it get into the hands of the founders of the company that they then started developing it and deciding, we might be able to utilize this, like you said, maybe for food processes or sustainable features. How does that work?
Yeah, so the organism, it was ethically harvested. So we only took it from the park once. And then from there, that's where the beauty of fermentation comes in because we're able to take this tiny organism and grow it into masses of a protein source in a very short period of time. So for us, it takes 2 to 3 days, and you feed it with sugar, for example. And after growing through fermentation, you're able to then take it and transform it into the final products that you want. So what you end up getting is a pretty neutral base. So you can transform it into like a milk or powder form that you can put in, or just solid chunks that you can shape into products. And then for the material side, we take that fungi and then we also combine with other inputs that are derived from fermentation. So, for example, for the Stella McCartney bag and the materials inside it, it was a material that was made through the fungi and also inputs that came from sugarcane fermentation. And then we're able to combine those and then transform that into the form we want. So, in our case, sheets. So, sheets of material of different thicknesses, and then we can add color, we can add top finishing layer to add different levels of gloss or different colors or hand modifiers to make it into the final product.
That's so cool. So what you're saying then is you can basically look at what needs to be created and then decide how you're going to, I guess, proceed with processing the structure of the fungi. Is that how it works? Because when you're talking about sheets, because I guess I'm trying to get my mind around, it's like you're not just creating rolls of material you would sell to a company. You're actually thinking about the product, the end product. Is that how it works?
A little bit of all, yes. So the fungi that we create can be applied to the specific outputs. In our case, to just make it pretty simple, the fungi that's used for the food products, we also use for the material side at Hydefy. However, at Hydefy, we take it and take it through several extra steps from it. And we definitely think about what the end consumer wants because whether it's in fashion or for a specific brand or whether it's for automotive or footwear, they're looking for different types of material, similar to how designers would look for different types of leather. So, to reduce the complexity, we want to make it as consistent to as furthest in the process as possible. But at the end, we change the different parameters of what brands may be looking for.
That's so interesting. So with this organism, then you're able to just generate as much of it as you need, right? You don't have to go harvest it from places like Yellowstone.
No, I think that would set a very bad precedent.
Well, obviously you can't harvest from Yellowstone, but frequently when we get into these conversations about sustainability and people start using these natural, what do you call it, natural materials, the question always comes up, well, do you then hurt the environment more by trying to harvest it? But this is actually something, now that you have it, you can lab grow it and utilize as
Mhm.
much of it as you need in various ways you need.
Definitely, definitely. And that's a conversation we have within the team quite a bit because we think about what inputs to use. And some of the other inputs we consider are from nature or plant derived, but there's always questions around not supporting monoculture or deforestation, a lot of implications when you think about the full supply chain.
Very true. And just bringing up Yellowstone again, it's like we want to go look at the beauty, but we also don't want to destroy it while we're there tromping around. So hence, please stay on the path, people. But
Mhm.
let me ask you, so then what's been like maybe one of the unexpected technical hurdles in developing Hydefy's material? Like, what have you come up against that you guys are like, ooh, how do we really do this? Because this is all very, it sounds very fun, but it's very sciencey. So you're like essentially creating this new material. There's no roadmap for you. How do you go about that?
I mean, which challenge to start with, right? So I think at the highest level, it's how do you get a material that is made of pretty natural inputs to be as durable, strong, and resistant as some of the traditional options, which can rely on synthetic, so petroleum-derived options or animal leather, for example, which have been honed over centuries to be as durable as they are. So I would say that was the overarching main technical challenge. And if at the risk of going to nitty-gritty, for example, I think one example of an unexpected technical hurdle is water and how it interacts. So in the very early stages, the material was very hydrophilic, as in it loved water, and you do not want your material to absorb water. And then through a new process and formulation, we made it extremely durable and hydrophobic. But that also came with its own challenges of making it more challenging to finish, for example, and work with traditional equipment. So that was more of an unexpected challenge, but thankfully we have a brilliant team that was able to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, again, since you guys are creating an entirely new material, it's like I guess you have to keep testing. It's like, well, would it work for this? Would it work for that? So with that said, one of the big things I kept hearing about when the conversation was around Hydefy is this big collaboration with Stella McCartney and the handbag and things like that. So first of all, how does a partnership like that develop? And secondly, when you did decide that you were going to produce this material specifically for this bag, what does that journey look like? How much input do you guys have? And how much input does the fashion house have? Like, how do you guys collaborate that something like that together? Because that makes it such a conversation piece. People are like, they want to hear more about Hydefy. Because when I saw that bag, I was like, I would buy that bag.
Absolutely. And we know what we're good at and what we're not good at. And we have a team of predominantly scientists. Our job and goal is to give consumers options of beautiful materials, but it's really the amazing designers and the brands that bring it to life. And there's that whole element of design. So with Stella McCartney in particular, I don't know if I could say that's a more of a typical way in a partnership would work, but we ended up getting connected through a connection at LVMH and through conversations. In short, the designer really fell in love with one of the concepts we showed them. And when you have a customer that really has a vision and an idea, we're there to be partners to help execute on it. And because it was a pretty special partnership of a case in which their values and our values lined up, and they also were interested in storytelling piece of it, I think that's why we did this very custom type of collaboration to create this silver material. So I think it definitely is a dialogue, as you mentioned, because we try to showcase different colors to show that we could do all different colors. We try to showcase many different interesting patterns, but at the end of the day, it's really the brand that will choose what makes sense for their collection at a certain point in time, and we want to support. And I think for us going ahead, because while we would love to, we're a pretty small team, so we are moving gradually toward a model where we will make a specific catalog of different colors available. But some of the custom orders will require a little bit of a higher minimum order quantity or a greater commitment from the brand's part. But we are making both available to whoever wants to work with us.
Yeah, it's definitely a great conversation piece, and I imagine it has gotten people more interested to learn what Hydefy is because when you create a beautiful product, people are always like, "Well, how did that happen? Where did it come from?" Because, like you
Mhm.
said, obviously the leather industry and tannery has thousands of years of history already built up. People know what the product is. They know it comes from cows. They don't know how. They don't understand the process. A lot of people don't care. So, you're kind of up against that challenge of now saying, well, this is a brand new material that can actually be more sustainable. Obviously, animals aren't killed, but also better for the environment and last longer. And this is, what it could do for you and your business. So, with that said, with that kind of conversation, how then do you get this into the production pipeline of more companies, whether it be fashion or even automotive? How does that look like for you guys? Because I mean, you're up against that preconceived notion, which is it's going to be almost a PVC derivative and it's going to be kind of like crappy. So, how does that conversation work? Like, how do you start convincing people like this is brand new, it's revolutionary, fungus among us, here's what they do?
Yes, and there's so many interesting like sub questions as part of that, right? There's the piece around how do we get in front of customers, and then how do we convince them and help them convince their internal stakeholders and also their end customers who are our end consumers. So a couple of different things. I would say that because we did build Hidify in stealth mode, we are still in the position of putting our name out there. So I think the Stella McCartney collaboration was the very first time when we created our website and started to talk about ourselves, and that's gotten people interested and started to get a bit of inbounds. We would love to continue to do more so that people are aware that there is a high performing option out there made with more nature derived materials. And then once we make those connections and we're in front of brands, I think it actually becomes a little easier in some ways, though still challenging because usually each brand has the performance metrics. So once we can demonstrate that it actually passes their performance metrics and can be transformed, that's the other key piece. A material can perform well, but ultimately brands care if you can make it into a handbag, you can make it into a car seat, you can make it into a shoe using the equipment and processes they have because they don't want to create a bunch of bespoke equipment just for a new type of material. Then I think it's a matter of does it fit their strategy? Does it help them advance their emissions goals? Does it also help with a story around innovation and how they're appealing to the newer customers and price? And I think that's where it becomes very specific to the brands, but that's what we're trying to do. And also highlight that it's not just the sustainability piece, but it's the innovation of a new type of material that can give end consumers options.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is there is like when you can tell the story and get people to be invested in it and to be
Mhm.
interested in it, that can change the whole conversation. Because as we know, the number one, I guess, block to any kind of innovation or change is human behavior. People don't want to change their behavior. It's easier to just do with what you know. If you
Mhm.
learn to walk a certain way and then suddenly somebody says, no, you should be walking this way, it's so hard to change. Like that's why even something like posture, people battle with their posture their entire lives because it's behavior and you forget on those, incremental kind of moments. So, you
This is
know,
me sitting up a little straighter after you mentioned posture.
I did too when I said posture. I totally did too. And I only mentioned that because I'm actually working on a posture product with another client of mine. So we were
Very
just having a
cool.
conversation about it. But it's behavior change, and that's been one of our biggest topics is like, how do we get people to change their behavior? Because behavior change is the hardest thing. People don't want to be inconvenienced. They don't think about it. They get busy, they just get lazy, whatever. So, with something like Hydefy and, developing this new, what are we calling it? A product or an how do I want to say it? Is it a product? Is it an innovation or is it a different way of doing things? I guess it's all three, right?
Yeah, we like to say innovative material,
There you go.
sustainable biomaterial, but it also is a new way of doing things, right? Reimagining what we put into our materials, how we collaborate with brands, because we're not a traditional supplier, so the relationship also needs to be adjusted a bit. So, all of the above.
All of the above. And in fact, you had mentioned earlier about the fact of like when you're developing this material, you have to create whole new systems to do that, new machinery to do that. And that's something I feel like that gets lost when people are talking about this stuff. They almost think like you have a product idea and then you just throw it down an assembly line and it happens. But when you're developing an entirely new material like this, it's like you have to create a whole new, I guess, machinery to do it, right?
Yes. And I think that's actually where the our amazing team of scientists have done an incredible job. And as a team, they'd say startups, you have to pivot, you have to make hard choices. And one of those hard choices we made is actually changing the way we manufacture. And what I mean by that is before we used to actually grow sheets of material kind of like a hide and take it through more of a tanning type of process. But we realized that if we want to have the type of impact we want to have, we it will require us to build new types of equipment. It'll require us to um, reinvent the system, which might actually take a lot longer and not be as cheap in terms of the price we can give to end consumers. So what we did have is an amazing team with diverse backgrounds, including people who worked in athletic footwear, building fighter jets, working in plastics injection molding. So they have seen true scaled processes, and we work backwards thinking about can we take common equipment and adjust it to suit our materials. So I think one of the innovation we have is not just the formulation of the materials, but the way in which we process the materials. So we're made in America now, but the equipment we use and the type of process we have could take place anywhere in the world. And that is something that could be appealing to our brand partners and consumers because we could shorten the supply chain. So in the future, when we grow and expand globally, we could have a location in Europe, location in Asia that can make it closer to the production location of our customers.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about there. In fact, I would love to sit in one of your team meetings and just hear people as they're bouncing around ideas because when you're just creating something from, out of nothing, it's so interesting the ideas you could come up with. In fact, I know that you actually use a breakthrough fermentation process, right? That actually helps then to use a fraction of water, land, energy required by traditional methods, which of course I love. And I did read on your website that, you did mention about protecting animals and the environment and stuff like that. So, how much of that is really worked into the ethos of the company? Is that something that is just built in with the mission statement, or was that kind of a byproduct of the fact, like, oh, we got this great material that also does this? Like, are you a brand that's backed by driven because you do want animals to be protected, or was this more like just a scientific innovation?
I think it's a mix because at the end of the day, a company and the values and the ethos are made up by the people. And it's a reinforcing cycle in which we attract people who are mission driven and also want to spend their energy and time to advance the North Star and to bring some of these products to life. So I would say that there's actually different types of motivations that people have. So protecting animals and animal cruelty is one. There are some who are not as motivated by that piece, but really care about sustainability. There's others that just really love the fact that there's this cool, innovative activity happening in the south side of Chicago. So it's a mix. So I would say the protection of animals isn't necessarily the core ethos of the company, but is definitely a pillar because that is one of the through lines of what we do. It's providing consumers other options, and these options that are as sustainable as possible by reducing the type of resource reliance on petroleum or other inputs, and also not harming animals in the process. And that's why you have a company that is filled with people who believe in that. And that's why it translates to conversations when we think about formulations, because that sets the parameters of what type of chemistries we're willing to entertain and what type of inputs we consider putting into the process.
Yeah, well said, well said. And as you mentioned earlier, you were coming from an entirely different industry and now find yourself in this. So tell me personally, what is it about this work that kind of interests you or lights you up that you really get out of bed and think to yourself, God, that's so cool. Because I personally love my job in marketing and people don't understand how I'm so excited about it. So what is it about your job that just makes you super excited to get out of bed?
There's so many things. And I know I'm in a very fortunate place to be able to say that, yeah, I'm excited to get out of bed and to work on this. And I think it's definitely the topic of, we're working on biomaterials and thinking about reimagining how we think about materials. And the fact that our team is working on a physical product that is so tangible, because then we can actually see the impact of our work on the Stella McCartney website or um, partnerships I can't talk about yet, but you can see them in your personal lives as consumers, and to me, that is concrete impact that you can feel. But also, I'm a firm believer that, happiness is also really determined by who you work with. And I feel very fortunate to work with a team of such kind and curious individuals who are also incredibly smart, working on solving problems. So I would say combination of all of those makes me really excited to go into the lab and work with the team and build this.
I totally agree. It is the job and also the people that you work with that can make it super special. And working on something again that is so revolutionary and different. You guys must have so many moments around the office where somebody goes, "Check this out, check this out. This is so cool," right?
Yes, there's some funny moments from everything from we were customizing some very unique scents for like odor, like perfume type of scents for some potential customers to just randomly Googling, what is the most carbon negative input that we can think of that's in nature, just all of the above of interesting conversations going on.
I can just imagine. So you did mention you can't really tell us about maybe the partnerships you're working on, but have you guys had any conversations or maybe ideas that were brought up that was really just a surprise to the team where you're like, wow, we didn't even think we that would be something people would be interested in. Maybe we should develop it for that. Have you had those aha moments?
Yes, there are some brands and manufacturers that are making things that we didn't consider. So, um, let's just say that when you think about just any type of experience, whether it's going on to an airplane and seeing an amenity kit, or going on a train and seeing where you sit, to the sports you watch and seeing um, what type of balls or footwear, all of these things that go into the sports profession. um, there's just a lot of things that we did not think about that I think make a lot of sense when we think about the adventure backgrounds, as well as where these materials, which are very high performing and very resistant to different elements, whether it's, water, sweat, etc., could go into. So, answer to your question is yes. There every day we're surprised and we love to hear from people who think there could be an interesting partnership on a certain area.
Okay, so what I'm personally hoping is in the near future, I will be outfitted head to toe in fungi related materials, and it'll just be a party that I cannot miss because like I
Yeah.
said, I'm a huge fungi fan. In fact, I'll tell you something funny. We had a guest on a couple of shows back, and she is out in Nova Scotia, and they created these cozies for bowls. So when your bowls are hot, you
Hmm.
put them in these little cotton cozies, and they have all these great prints on them. And the name of the company is called what is it? Oh God, what is it? Cool Hand Nuke. No, that's the movie. Wait. Yes, Cool Hand Nuke it is. Cool Hand Nuke. Because it's a bowl cozy and it's based on the movie Cool
Yes.
Hand Luke. Okay. I can't believe I must mess it up. But the point of my story is she was like, I want to send you one, pick out one from the website, the print that you want. And I immediately saw the one that was called Fungus Among Us. That was all this fungus print. And I was like, girl, I absolutely want that one. And she did send it to me and I use it every day. So I'm like, I will
I
send
love
you the
that
link because you have to
story.
get one for the team. It's the coolest thing ever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please share it.
The
Please
fungus
send it
among us
over.
bowl cozies are like rock my world. So yeah, huge fungus fan here. I don't know why I'm like so excited about fungus. It's so stupid. But anyway, it's been so
Oh,
much fun talking to you. But tell me then, like, what do you think is kind of maybe the future on the horizon for these biomaterials like you're creating? Are we going to get to a place really in the next 20 years where we can, utilize these materials on a grander scale, get them into a process where it's not, where it's more cost effective, people are more familiar with them? I mean, are we really moving that way as an industry? Can that happen?
yes. The answer is a resounding yes, especially in the next 20 years. There's already there's so many incredible innovators that are working on different products, like what Hydefy is doing. And also we have different regions that are starting to put into place regulation that's encouraging people. Europe is leading the charge, but it's going to affect American companies as well that do business globally. There's also companies that are starting to put a stance around emissions targets, and they have to make changes. And I think what's great is that innovation is already happening and people are looking into whether it's recycled materials, which has become more of standard, but also starting to think about bio-based inputs and also the afterlife of the materials and being more thoughtful about putting them back into earth, however way it's possible. And right now is actually a relatively challenging time just because of the uncertainty around some of the supply chains. But overall, it's undeniable that the macro trend is going towards these innovations coming into market. And I think what we need to do over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years to 20 years is continue with the demand that will accelerate innovation, and continue to demand more from companies that are making and selling these products. But also, lastly, I think as consumers, we should not let perfect be the enemy of good and start to celebrate some of these wins as we go so that gradually these materials don't count as new materials, but rather it's just the materials that make up the composition of our system.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And also seeing now how with these new materials we're creating then, what is their life, what is their lifetime going to look like? Because we get excited at first like we created this new thing, but now like what's the longevity of the product? And I'll ask you now with the Hydefy product material, what does that longevity of that material look like? Once the Stella McCartney bag is out of fashion, or maybe it got ruined, it got slashed, I don't know, dropped from an airplane, and it's no longer usable, what happens to that material? Is it biodegradable? What happens?
So with the materials, I think there's a lot of different aspects we have to consider when we think about the durability of a material. One of the ways in which we reduce our impact is reducing the impact of the inputs that we put in, but also consuming less. So at Hydefy, we really focus on making materials that are durable, that won't just disintegrate or degrade by itself, because that's what luxury is, right? You want to be able to have longevity. So from a durability perspective, it's actually quite strong, to the point we found this out because some of the team members accidentally machine washed their wallets made with the material um, in the washing machine accidentally multiple times. And I also personally, we all wear test ourselves materials because as a category, we're still pretty new, so we need to understand how it wears over time. Hydefy, we've demonstrated post-industrial recyclability, which means that at the end of our production process, whatever scraps or whatever we don't use, or we can put it back into our process and create new materials. I think there's an open question, and we want to work with brands around what happens to the very, very end products once it has things like zippers, buckles, and a bunch of additives on it. Whose responsibility is that? And I think that's a conversation we need to have about the broader system. And we want to partner with the brands as we think about the post-consumer recyclability and the afterlife of it.
There are so many words in there that you said that are new to me. I'm definitely going to be listening to this podcast afterwards. So what did you say it was post-industrial recycling?
Yes, so it would be after production. So because we are a material supplier, so for us, that would be once we make the materials would be recyclable at that point. But when I mention post-consumer, it's thinking about the final end product. Once it's in a handbag, once a consumer is done using it, what happens at that point in time? Sorry for using too many jargons, I realized.
No, it's fantastic. We like to learn on this podcast. And not only that, we like to know that there are people out there like you that are really thinking through this, like really taking like the hard questions and thinking through how do we make things better? How do we make them sustainable? And what happens at the end of their life cycle as, we move on? Because although we will not be here forever, there other people hopefully will still inhabit the earth. And the bane of my existence is throwing anything into our dumpster that I know is going to end up in a landfill. So I asked the question because I love the Stella McCartney bag, but I don't want to buy more stuff at this point in my life. I want to be responsible with my purchases. And I think you actually just gave us a really beautiful, question, answer to that of how we do that. So thank you so much for that. So, if people want to find out more about Hydefy and what you guys are up to, where can they find you online? What's your website?
It's simple, hydefy.com, hydefy.com, or find us on LinkedIn. And you can always email us at hello@hydefy.com.
Thank you so much. And we did talk a lot about the Stella McCartney bag, but listen, people, there's going to be a lot more happening out there. It's definitely the shiny object to make you look and say, hey, what's that? And it definitely worked. But with that said, Rachel, it has been so much fun to talk to you. You've taught me so much. Like I said, I'm listening to this show after we are done because there was so much in there, but I really do feel like we're in a better place because of it. So thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Stephanie, and for the really thoughtful questions.
Thanks for listening to the Wild Party Podcast. If you're an entrepreneur or professional who would like to be on this podcast, please visit boomtownmarketing.com and click on podcast. We believe that every business has the potential to change the world for good, and we want to support our community to help make the world more ethical, compassionate, and sustainable for all future generations to come. And if you're looking to build your business, no matter what level you're at now, request your free marketing consultation at boomtownmarketing.com and click Get Started.